Welcome to the second in 4 videos that walk through the AQA GCSE unit for the Normans. In this question we will examine question 2, which is the 8-mark importance question. The question reads: explain what was important about the building of monasteries in Norman England. Note the question stem is in italics. This remains the same for all questions, but the topic will change. The concept for this question is importance. This is very similar to the significance question for your medicine paper, but it does not require you to examine a long-term significance, since this is a depth rather than a breadth study. Instead, you need to consider 2 distinct ways in which the topic was important. This can be important from a social, economic, or political perspective. In other words, important to the people, to the Norman kings, or to the wealth of the country. In this question, the topic is the building of monasteries, a very precise topic that requires you to know what a monastery is. If you are struggling to recall learning on a topic as specific as this, it is better to aim for one good, solid paragraph than to attempt 2. This will save you time for questions you are more confident in. You now have 1 minute to consider the following 2 questions. What is a monastery? And why were they important? The Google definition of a monastery is a building or buildings occupied by a community of monks living under religious vows. This makes them different to the local village church, because not everyone attended the monastery, only those that devoted their life to God by taking the Saint Benedictine vows of poverty, celibacy, and obedience. I can identify 3 ways in which monasteries were important during the Norman period. Firstly, they were holy places that contained a shrine. Often people would go on pilgrimage to that shrine. Secondly, they provided services to the local community such as education, charity, and healthcare, though the latter should not be explored in too much detail since this is not a question about medicine and public health. Finally, they gave ordinary people the opportunity to devote their lives to God through taking vows of commitment to become monks or nuns. They would then pray for the souls of the dead, which was important to the local people, who believed in the concept of purgatory. You now have a minute to consider this question. What were the key changes made to monasteries by the Normans? The Normans made three important changes to monasteries after 1066. The first is part of William's wider reforms of the Church. The Normans reduced corruption by enforcing the Saint Benedictine vows. The second was essentially a large renovation project. They demolished the old wooden-framed monasteries and built more permanent stone monasteries, especially those who were attached to cathedrals, which were rebuilt in the Romanesque style. Finally, the Normans introduced a new religious order called the Cluniac order. This was far stricter than other monastic communities, whereby monks had to take a vow of silence, and they had to employ lay brothers to complete chores and farming duties, so they could devote their whole lives to prayer. Let's now examine the first paragraph of my model answer. It reads, monasteries were important because they were religious houses where people devoted their life in service to God. William wanted to reform the monasteries so that the monks were following the Saint Benedictine vows. This meant living a celibate life of devotion and poverty. This was important because then the ordinary people would respect the monks and trust them to provide important services, like education and healthcare. It was also important so that William could impress the Pope and fulfill his promote to rid the English Church of corruption. This meant he maintained good relations with the Pope, and this boosted England's reputation as a Christian country. This paragraph links back to the overarching theme of church reform and the Norman kings and their relationship with the papacy. Once you have learnt one or two important facts about the monasteries, you can use your explanation back to this overarching theme to explain why the changes made to monasteries were important to William and future Norman kings. The second paragraph looks at the rebuilding of monasteries. It reads as follows: the Normans also made important changes to the buildings of monasteries. During Saxon times, many monasteries fell into poverty and had crumbling buildings. The Normans rebuilt the monasteries, most notably those attached to cathedrals, which were rebuilt in the Romanesque style, such as Durham and Lincoln. These new buildings acted as symbols of both Norman and religious power. Furthermore, many attracted new monks as recruits to monastic life, and this further boosted the prestige of the monastery. It also meant that many monasteries could do outreach work, such as giving alms or shelter to the poor. This paragraph relates specifically to the building of monasteries, and why this was important both politically and socially. They had political significance as symbols of prestige for both the Norman regime and the Church, and social importance, as they encourage more ordinary people to take holy orders and devote their lives to God. You can then link this back to the overarching theme of reform of the Church and ensuring that the monasteries are properly fulfilling their role in society. Put together, the answer looks like this: two fully developed paragraphs that provide two distinct reasons why the monasteries were important. Remember though, for tricky questions like this one, to aim for one good solid paragraph, and then if time allows you can attempt a second. Thank you for watching. Tune into the next lecture in this series to learn how to answer the 4-mark describe question and the 8-mark social impact question for the AQA Germany paper.